You're watching The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
You know, I really love behind-the-scenes stories and stuff having to do with movies. You know, takes that were never meant to be, ad-lib lines, things that just, you know, that shouldn't have happened and suddenly were in the movie, or things that they didn't plan. And I came across one today that I really like. There's the Christopher Nolan movie, 1970, all about World War One. Just an amazingly epic scope movie that was extremely expensive to make. Every take was just money after money after money. And there's the scene in the movie where the guy is just running across the battlefield, just full bore. And as he's running, he runs into one of the soldiers, because he's running kind of this way across the battlefield, and they're all running towards the enemy. And he runs into the guy and bounces off the ground and just gets up and just starts running again, and goes probably another few yards and runs into someone else. And it just really shoots him across the ground. And he gets back up and just keeps running. And I really love that scene because there's such authenticity to it, because, you know, the way it looked, it really looks like they ran into him and knocked him over, and that the intensity he had to get where he was going. I think they show in the trailers. It's just this really cool scene. Well, I found out today it wasn't planned. He wasn't supposed to run into anybody and get knocked over. It happened because they were running out of money. And that scene was very expensive to shoot, because you had all of these extras, effects going on, all of this stuff. So Nolan told the actor, whatever happens, don't stop. Just keep going, because he didn't want to have to do it again. So this kid just gets in there and just starts running, and sure enough, bam, gets knocked over by an extra, gets back up to his feet, and keeping in mind, I got to keep going. Gets up and starts running again, and he gets back up to full speed, and someone else, bam, and just triples him over. And then when he gets back up, he just keeps going. And that's why that scene looks so authentic, because he really did run into those guys. It wasn't like a plan, because you can't really fake that. I mean, you need to have someone with a wire to pull, and it would be kind of a ridiculous thing to set up. So it makes sense that it was fake, or that it really happened. It wasn't planned, but still, it really, really works well. So, all right, guys, stay tuned for the Dan Wickline Show. Hey everybody, welcome to the Dan Wickline Show here on The Experience. It is June 15th, Thursday. We had New Comic Day yesterday. We spent yesterday talking about the late great John Romita Sr. That was a very good show. Felt very cathartic in a lot of ways. It is awesome to see all these tributes and posts to him. Yesterday's show was going to be about the Dungeons and Dragons movie, which I finally got a chance to see. Kyle was going to join me, so we bumped it. We bumped it to today. Kyle will be on about 5:15 Eastern, 2:15 Pacific, and we're going to talk about the Dungeons and Dragons movie. It hit me very differently than I expected it to. There were things about it that I really liked and things that I didn't like, but they weren't the things I expected. And the movie didn't play out as I expected, which all very fascinating. Actually, I think that's I really like that. By the way, hello to Cool, to Ed, Triple B, and Kenneth. Glad you guys are all here. JD is on the board. And we got a little bit of news to cover, so let's go ahead and hop into that. So let's do the news. All right. We're going to start with our sound effect. One of the tough things when I started doing, I'm driving as fast as I can to get someplace so I can be with you all. Okay. So Kyle is currently driving, but he'll be here soon. All right, so one of the things when I started doing the Marvel rewatch that made it difficult is that the Incredible Hulk wasn't available on any streaming services. Now, I had recently started rewatching it when it was on HBO Max. I got about halfway through, and I thought, okay, we'll do the Incredible Hulk this week. I'll go back to Max, finish it out, and then be able to do it. Well, when I went back, it wasn't there, which means I had to go and dig it out from my Blu-ray collection. And yeah, I still buy all these on physical media just because you never know when they're going to disappear, you know? So I watch it and we do the show, and that's great. Well, the thing is that with it not being available on any streaming services, it feels like a part of the MCU is missing. You know, the fact that it's not part of the Disney Plus lineup. And if you guys watched the show when I did it, you'll remember that I thought the movie was underrated, had some really great moments, had some good performances. Louis Leterrier's directing I thought was good. I loved how he brought the creature across as more of a horror entity than a hero in the first part. I wish they would have been able to go with their first choice for Banner instead of having the studio pull rank, because originally they wanted to go with Mark Ruffalo, and the studio for Universal forced them to go with Ed Norton. So it would have been interesting, but with all of this stuff coming up, you know, Thunderbolt Ross is back in the MCU, Emil Blonsky, and it's the actors from that. You've got Tim Roth. We had William Hurt. He's now going to be replaced by Harrison Ford. But we also had the recent announcement that Liv Tyler is coming back as Betty Ross, and that Tim Blake Nelson is returning as Samuel Stearns, aka the leader in Captain America: Brave New World. So you've got all these appearances of these characters, but again, it just seems kind of weird that it wasn't on Disney Plus, and that somehow they should be able to work out a deal. Well, the deal's been made. Starting tomorrow, The Incredible Hulk will be available on Disney Plus. So if you guys haven't seen it in a long time or never actually sat down and watched it, I suggest you do, because it's already affected Captain America: Civil War, Black Widow, and She-Hulk. It's going to affect Captain America: Brave New World. And like I said, it's a better movie than people remember it as. I think the problem was it came out shortly after Iron Man, and Iron Man was so good. And we were in the middle of the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy. So the bar at that moment was like here, and Hulk was just below it. So, hey, John, good to see you. Kyle says, is Harrison Ford a lateral move from John Hurt, in your opinion? Well, actually, it's from William Hurt. John Hurt, different actor. It was William Hurt who played him. I don't know. I think both of them are very good actors. I don't think it's necessarily an upgrade or a downgrade. I think they have a different to them. William Hurt always struck me more as the Jimmy Stewart type, where you hire him to play the character, where Harrison Ford, you hire him to be Harrison Ford. John Hurt was the war doctor. William Hurt was Thunderbolt Ross. So I think Harrison Ford plays Harrison Ford. There's some degrees to it. He's not struck in like the John Wayne thing where he's always John Wayne, but he's got the same range as maybe a Robert De Niro, where, there's still a certain thing that comes with him. He's still Harrison Ford. And I think that that is the difference between the two, where William Hurt kind of loses himself in the role. Harrison Ford makes the role his. I know that may not seem like that may not make a lot of sense, but so I think Ford is a sidestep. It's a good choice for having to replace him. William Hurt was the guy in Lost in Space, correct? Ed says it is a good movie too. It doesn't get a lot of love, but it's so much better than the Ang Lee, Eric Bana Hulk. Yeah, definitely better. William Hurt played a very subtle Ross that I liked, cool, calm, collected, but you could feel his rage bumbling underneath. That's what JD says, and I agree. That is a very good point. Did I miss any other comments above? Pretty soon the physical copies will be discontinued. I hope not, Lieutenant. I'm hoping they keep putting them out because, like I said, I like physical copies of movies and stuff, but I also like all the DVD extras that come on them too. So, all right, let's go ahead and move on to our next story. Mortal Kombat 2. Mortal Kombat 2 is happening. I really liked the new Mortal Kombat movie when it popped up on HBO Max. Now, I don't know if I would have gone out and watched it, but the fact that it debuted on HBO Max made me go, yep, I'm in. What do we got? Now they've rounded out the cast for Mortal Kombat 2. Martin Ford from Red Sonja, Desmond Child. Now here it says from Joyride, but Desmond Child was also one of the flag smashers in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Anna Thoy Nguyen from Suka, and Damon Harriman from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Now they're all coming on board for roles. Martin Ford is going to play the villainous Outworld Emperor Shao Kahn. Chiam is going to play Edenian King Gerard. Nguyen will be Queen Sindel, and Harriman as Netherrealm Demon Quan Chi. So I'm not familiar with some of those characters. Now, this is the follow-up to the 2021 Mortal Kombat. And of course, it's based on the huge blockbuster created by Ed Boon and John Tobias, the video game franchise. Now, that was one of the ones that got released in the theaters and on HBO Max, or what was formerly known as HBO Max, back in April of 2021. And it still did about 84 million worldwide theatrically, even with it being released day and date. Now, that movie followed a young MMA fighter named Cole Young, played by Louis Tan, as he faced off against Outworld enemies in a high-stakes battle for the universe. Details as of the sequel are still kind of under wraps, but a lot of the characters are returning. Besides Tan, Jessica McNee, who played Sonya Blade, Josh Lawson as Kano, Tenenobu Asano is returning as Lord Raiden, Makad Brooks as Jax, Ludi Lin as Liu Kang, Chin Han as Shang Tsung, Joe Talisman as Bi-Han and Sub-Zero, Haruka Sanada as Hanzo Hasashi, and previously announced that Carl Urban, I love this, Carl Urban is going to be Johnny Cage. That right there, there's the price of the ticket. Carl Urban is Johnny Cage. Tati Gabrielle is going to be Jade. Adeline Rudolph as Katana. Simon McCoy will be returning to direct, and The script is going to be done by Jeremy Slater. So that's all fun. All right. Got a couple more news stories here. We have, you know how when Marvel puts out a movie, they then put out a assemble that shows behind the scene footage. And it was expected that yesterday would have seen the debut of the assembled for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. That was the original plan. Well, that special has been delayed now indefinitely. And there's no indication on when it's going to be released. And now, while no reasons were given for the delay, a lot of people are speculating that it's tied to Jonathan Majors' legal problems. And there's a chance we may not get it because Majors would be a huge part of that. So they're trying to downplay right now until they find out what's going on. Of course, if you're not familiar, Majors was, of course, arrested for sexual assault, went in trial, and there was supposed to be a court date on June 13th. But there's been no updates about it. Nothing has come out. We don't know if the date got moved, if he showed up. And he was ordered to appear in person on June 13th. So the fact that there's no news really is kind of strange, because normally you get an actor showing up on a court date, you got coverage. Now, I realize that most of the news were kind of focused on a different person dealing with court. But you would think that not every reporter was in Miami. You would think somebody would have been up in New York kind of paying attention to this. So until we hear otherwise, it's kind of up in the air what's happening with his case and what's going to happen with him going forward with Marvel. But as long as they're kind of holding back on releasing this, there's a sign that it's still way up in the air. So, plus now they have the Tinoch Huerta thing to deal with as well. So Marvel's got a lot to deal with. And then speaking of Marvel and their partners over at Sony, ever since Across the Spider-Verse came out and we saw Donald Glover, not Danny Glover. Danny Glover would have been an interesting change, but Donald Glover playing Uncle Aaron or the Predator or Prowler as a live action in the animated movie, people have been like, well, that's obvious. That means we're going to get Miles Morales in live action. That's what everybody's been talking about. Oh, we're going to get a live action Miles Morales. Well, Amy Pascal, who's been the producer on all the Spider-Man movies and stuff, and she also produces the live action Tom Holland movies with MCU and the Sonyverse movies, so the Spider-Man universe. So she said that Miles Morales and Tom Holland, they're completely separate worlds. Now, you never know. I would never say no to anything, but we have a lot of movies to make about Miles and a lot of movies to make about Peter. I'm a movie producer. I want to keep going with this franchise with Tom. So all the people who are saying, well, there's going to be a crossover, all that stuff, don't expect it anytime soon. It's not currently in the works. Just by having Donald Glover in the movie in live action, or references to Tom Holland's character with the Doctor Strange quote in the movie, that doesn't necessarily mean that Miles Morales is going to suddenly pop up in the MCU. Will he eventually? I think he absolutely will. But I think they're still moving forward with the Tom Holland stuff. And that's pretty much what they have planned for now. Will we get some soon? I mean, like I said, I think we're still a ways away from having Miles pop up. JD says, Tom Holland just announced a year off for a mental health break from acting. I think that sort of forces the hand if they need for a Spidey. Actually, JD, there's a problem with that. Oh, Kyle said that. Tom Holland announced that and people went absolutely crazy. And then Tom Holland had to come out and go, guys, I'm already 8 months into that year off. So he's 2/3 through that year already. And with the writers' strike going on, there's no way that he's going to be jumping into a project, or they're going to need him in a project in the next 4 months. So I think his time off will come and go, and it won't be a problem because he's only, like I said, he's only got 4 more months of his year off. So I think people took that out of context, saying he finished The Crowded Room, the series he's got. Kyle didn't see the second part of the quote. Yeah. Like confusing, like the EXP is talking to itself. Yes, that does throw me off sometimes too. But yeah, he did The Crowded Room. He was a producer on it and an actor in it. It was a very emotional series for him. He said he came out of it. He took a week off in Mexico, came back, finished up the producing, and said, I need time off. So yeah, he decided to take a year off. But like I said, he's already 8 months into that year off. So don't expect him to suddenly be gone. But as in suddenly be gone, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, Kyle will join us. And we're going to talk Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. We'll be right back.
Why was Princess Zelda sad after watching a bunch of YouTube videos? She couldn't find a link in the description. We'll stop if you subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's super easy. Click subscribe and click the bell when you do. And thanks for supporting the EXP.
Did you know that across America there are over 2, maybe even 3 live stream producers who can't even afford Mountain Dew? Take Brian here. Brian has gone 2 weeks without a sip of Red Bull. If it goes on much longer, he may take a shower and get a real job. Situations like this are as tragic as they are preventable. Join the experience on YouTube and gain access to special emojis and members-only streams. For less than a cup of coffee, you can keep socially awkward hermit people working from their parents' basements where they belong. Scan the QR code on the screen to join. You'll be glad you did.
Go follow the experience on TikTok at @the_EXP1 or scan the QR code on the screen. Our TikTok is like everywhere else we are, except you only have to deal with us for a minute. Seems like a win-win to me.
Everybody, welcome back. Kyle is with us. Before we jump into Dungeons and Dragons, though, I want to point out something. There are news reports right now talking about how Marvel's upcoming Secret War or Secret Invasion is the lowest rated or reviewed series on Rotten Tomatoes. It's at a 67% after 33 reviews. But I want to point out something that so far, reviewers and stuff have seen 2 episodes of 6. 2. That's the equivalent of watching 3 Days of the Condor the first act of 3 Days of the Condor and trying to share your opinion, or the first act of Captain America: The Winter Soldier, or any of those movies, and
the first 15 minutes of Rocky.
What?
It's the first 15 minutes of Rocky.
Yeah, it's the first 2 of 6, and people are giving reviews and stuff, and that's insane. So don't take that with any credence. So
I will tell you, I already hate it, but that's just me.
Larissa says it's crazy because on October 20th, Spider-Man 2 came out on the PS5, and it's probably one of the most anticipated games to date. They have not said much, but Miles and Spidey and Venom are all in it. People are all very curious as to how this is going to make sense, and it's going to make so much money. Yeah, I don't think the video games and the MCU is all connected, but the Sony stuff, it's kind of vapous. It's kind of whatever is they want to do. I don't think there is a Kevin Feige over at Sony as much as there is, somebody kind of guiding the whole thing. So, all right, we only have you for a short amount of time, I know. So we should jump in and talk about Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. I finally got to watch it. I just I wasn't going to get Paramount Plus just to see the damn thing, and I wasn't able to get over to the theater when it was out, so I just bought it on disc because I'm a D&D fan. I play D&D. I love D&D, and I like Chris Pine, and I thought there's no way I'm not going to like this movie.
I wish you'd have told me. I just loaned you my Paramount Plus.
Oh.
Because I bought Paramount Plus to watch this. And then I found out that it has Blue's Clues and all of the shows my nephew likes, so I kept it.
Cool. Well, so I watched the movie, and it was not what I expected. Having seen the trailer, in my mind, I had things in different order. I thought Xenix, I think is his name, Ray J. Paul's character, the paladin, Reggae Gene Page, or however he pronounces his name, I do not know.
The guy from Bridgerton.
Yeah, the guy from Bridgerton. I thought that we were going to meet the other characters, the thieves, then they would do the whole thing with Hugh Grant's character and going through the maze, and then we'd hook up with the paladin, and then we'd get the big bad situation. And it didn't work that way at all. Zenk was a side quest, which makes perfect sense. And to me, he comes across as kind of a legendary character in the same way as Arctis Cimber, Volo, these characters, or Drizzt, all these like Forgotten Realm characters that pop up in regular gameplay. And that's what the character struck me as when I watched it, which I thought was great because he was so much better at everything than the main characters were, which fit that role as well. But also, had he stuck around, he was so much better at everything that he would have stole the movie.
Yeah, he's that character as a game master that you put in because your team is flailing and your only option is TPK. So you give them a helper who's so overpowered, and you've rolled the stats until you've got what you need because he's a non-player character. And you're just like, I need someone to guide them through this forest. Mm-hmm. And they get to the other end of the forest, and he's cursed by a spell. He can't leave the forest. Kind of thing, right? Like, it's this idea of sometimes you need a little help. And that's what that character was. And I think what's cool is that character can now, if you do a Dungeons and Dragons 2, the next generation, here he comes. And he pops in and out, and he leaves. And he's a force ghost. He's there when you need him.
He specifically reminds me of Arctis Cimber. Arctis is a character who pops up in the Forgotten Realms books, but he is worked into different adventures. He's part of the Ring of Winter, which is a very powerful artifact. And if you play Tomb of Annihilation, he shows up at different points. And there's a whole backstory, and you get pulled into that. So that's what he reminds me. He's not just a standard NPC. To me, he's a legendary character or a lore character. Or if you play World of Warcraft, he's like Khadgar.
Yeah. He's certainly one of those characters that is so overpowered. His existence in the game or the movie throws the balance off entirely.
Yeah.
So having him just be a little bit and just kind of guide them through this one little side quest, this one little mini game, is great. I thought it was the only way you could use him. I will say this, Dan. You said that it wasn't what you expected, and it wasn't at all what I expected. But because I went in, I think about things like a game master. It became a little predictable to me early on.
Okay.
When you see them early in the movie and they go on the adventure that predates the movie, and you see it kind of as a flashback in a storytelling kind of way, and you see the red wizard with the red horn, you're like, oh, okay, bad guy, got it. And you know that's where it's going.
Yeah.
And so for me, Hugh what's his face? Hugh Grant's character was actually a bad guy. Shocko Shocks. Like, it became sort of predictable in that regard. What was great about this movie was the things it did to usurp that predictability. Was the going on the side quest and having to fight the world's chunkiest dragon.
Yes.
Like, that dragon is, if you have a cat that is obese, this is your dragon. Like,
yes,
JD, someday put a picture of your, like, if you could put a picture of your cat up right now,
yeah.
If JD's cat was a dragon, that was the cat, that was the dragon. Or going back to meet, I can't think of her name right now, the ex-husband.
Bradley Cooper's character.
Yeah, Bradley Cooper's character. That was a fun little side quest. And some of these other little things were just great, kind of in the same way that when you're running a successful campaign, everyone knows where you're going.
Yeah.
But it's the things you do to kind of get people off track and kind of explore the world more that really make the game great. It's kind of the problem I have with Vox Machina, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know where they're going. I wish they did more of we have to go do this side quest to get this, like they did in the second season.
Yeah.
You have to go do more of this thing to do this thing so this thing works. I really like that.
I cannot believe how much it felt like an actual D&D game, which blew my mind because, like, there were some pretty unique ways of using abilities that, I wouldn't have thought of, but you would think of in the middle of a game,
Well, and there was some stuff that they're like, look, if we made them do all the stuff you have to do in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, the movie would be 9 hours long.
Yeah.
So we're the time it takes to cast this spell or use this weapon or do this thing, we're ignoring that intentionally because it's a movie. The need for characters to rest. There's one part where they rest, but they otherwise don't. And as well as I do, if your characters don't rest, you don't heal, their hit points add up, it turns into a problem. Yeah. So the fact that they did that in a way that makes sense cinematically, I thought was really well done. It's the kind of thing that normally would bother me.
Yeah.
And
I'm surprised you liked the movie. I really.
Well,
I'm surprised you liked it.
I'll tell you why. But that stuff didn't bother me because they came out and said, hey, Dungeons and Dragons fans, here's the deal. Right? Like, if Marvel would come out and say, hey, we're going to name this movie Civil War, but we're not going to tell the Civil War story at all. We don't care about the Civil War story. We just like the title. I could set my expectations. And so because they were really good about saying, hey, just know that we're stealing a little bit from Pathfinder here, or we're stealing a little bit from White Wolf here, or we're stealing a little bit from, Call of Cthulhu in terms of the way the mechanics works over here. Great. I can set my expectations realistically.
The biggest complaint I have heard, and I think he froze, the biggest complaint I've heard about the movie, and it is the most just nitpicky thing, and that's everybody who goes, a druid can't become an owlbear, what the hell?
Well, that's one of them. I kept going, not a real thing. But it didn't bother me. That didn't bother me so much.
Yeah. Yeah,
here's why I love this movie, Dan. Can I tell you why I love this movie? I want to play this campaign with these characters now.
Yeah, and if you have D&D Beyond, they give you those characters as downloadable sheets.
It felt to me like that thing where you're sitting around with other people who play, like after a convention day, or you and I just sitting talking and sharing fish stories of Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how true the story is, and you don't know how true my stories are, but they're Dungeons and Dragons stories. So the truth of it is only sort of relevant. And that's what I loved about it, right? Is it just felt like this is a friend of mine who's a game master telling me a story about this crazy campaign he ran.
Yeah.
And it was a thoroughly enjoyable way to watch the movie. I didn't really have to worry about how true it was to Dungeons and Dragons, because it wasn't like Will Wheaton's tabletop show where you're seeing them roll for things, or some of these other games where you watch where you're seeing them play. And it wasn't like Vox Machina where they're ignoring the fact, it almost feels like they're ignoring the fact that this is a game they've played. It felt like, no, this is the game we played. Let me tell you about it. So
there was a couple moments, I watched it with Lisa, and there was a couple moments that she made comments that I didn't pick up because I get lost in the story. But there was the when Zenk went off, she turned to me, she goes, "Oh, that was a side quest." I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "I love
the fact
that
he walks in a straight line."
Mm-hmm.
Like, he doesn't go around, he just goes over the
and they call that out too. Such an NPC thing.
Like when you're walking, like when a video game character walks away from you in an RPG video game, and you're like, that's not how physics works.
Yeah.
Why are you walking across the lake? Right.
The other thing would be if he just vanished, would have been awesome.
Right. Where'd he go?
But another thing is there was a moment where somebody tried to do something and went horribly wrong, and Lisa leaned over and she went, "He rolled a 1." Yeah, and you get those moments. But for me, it was the clever way they used things, like putting that players would think of, but people designing the game would never have come up with. And if you were writing a script, you'd be like, no way. But for them to go, we'll put the portal on a painting and put it in the thing. It's like, oh, that's brilliant.
Right, and then when the painting falls, and it's like, I only need a quarter of an inch so I can get in as a worm.
Yeah.
What?
Yes.
Like that's one of those moments where your dungeon master does this and goes, okay.
Yeah.
Roll for,
my other
stealth?
favorite thing.
I don't even know. Like,
my favorite thing Lisa said was at the moment they went into the castle and they, one went this way, one went that way, and then two went this other way. And she goes, "You never split the party." I'm like, and that to me this was a game. This was watching a live action game. And to me, it is better than how Critical Role does, because Critical Role takes their and then makes a story. Matt Mercer is an incredible storyteller,
Right.
but this was more. It almost felt like the writers sat down and played a game to figure out the plot.
And this was a thought I had, Dan, after, and I wanted to ask you this. I wanted to wait for you to watch the movie, and I wanted to ask you this. Vox Machina would be greatly improved if Matt Mercer or someone did an omnipotent third-party voiceover. Because Chris Pine telling the story of some of this and some of the parts of this movie really did help with some of what's happening in Vox Machina that we deal with. Instead, it was just explained by a third-party voiceover in Dungeons & Dragons. I think that would really help the Vox Machina series. It wouldn't necessarily help the YouTube stuff that they do, but the animated series, I think it would help. Get James Earl Jones just to read some stage directions or something.
There you go. Now, see, part of what drew me into this is the first time I ever played Dungeons and Dragons, I looked at all my options and I went, I have to be a bard. I was born to be a bard. It was just right there for me. And my character's name was Davrin North, and that's the name I came up with. And oddly enough, Davrin North is going to appear in a comic book soon. Matt Hawkins, who created this whole world we were playing in, is doing a comic based off of this world, and my character shows up to kind of guide them. So I love that.
If your character isn't a giant, Matt has done it wrong.
Nope. They've done an amazing job with it.
I just wanted to be a bard giant with long hair and a beard. Like, Matt, I don't know what you're doing. If you hear this, Matt, edits.
No, I got to choose what my character looked like, and I gave pictures, and the artist drew them.
What are we even doing, Dan? Come on.
But that character reminded me so much of Chris Pine's character, of Edwin Darwin, I think it's the name. And it was just so much fun seeing the bard and the scene where he's singing and the now the hologram glitching again. That's a low roll, you know. He gets his foot stuck, and the hologram starts going. You know, it was like so many great little moments like that. But the thing I didn't like about the movie is there were parts that it felt like it dragged, where we were suddenly dealing with a lot of character backstory. And I realized that it's like the whole thing with Bradley Cooper and her visiting. And I get those are part of the game and I understand their place, but at the same time, it kind of slowed things down. I don't know if I would have put them in. I get why they're there, but there were moments it's like more to the Talking Dead guys, you know, the animated corpses. That's great. How many times have you ever had to do something like that and you accidentally ask a question you didn't mean to ask?
Every time.
Yeah. And the poor guy going, somebody ask me a question, please.
Right. My thing about those moments where it was character development stuff, I get some of it. I really do. And you want a fantasy cast and have Bradley Cooper in it so that there's a pop for Bradley Cooper showing up? Great. Who cares? But it didn't add anything significant other than the fact that they got the portal staff.
Yeah.
Right? It's okay, so this is a loot drop that you're spending 10 minutes on? I don't really dig it. Some of the other things for me, though, were things that were like too tropey. Okay, the bad guy is bringing everybody together so they can steal all their treasure. We're going to steal his boat. Okay. You know, or we're going to have Chimera in the maze thing.
Yeah.
There are other characters you could have thrown in there that would have been interesting. I did love the use of the one, which is like 98 too few gelatinous cubes.
Yeah.
I thought that was clever.
Yeah, it was.
But there were parts that it felt like we need a D&D thing here, as opposed to a story point here. And when they didn't do the story point thing and they did the D&D thing, they either executed it ham-fistedly, or they executed it so much better than they had any right to. There was no in the middle. And I would have rather had some of the strong story points happen rather than let's just throw, again, as much as the reanimated corpses were great, let's just make them talk to 19 reanimated corpses. Let's make it a montage. Okay.
One of the things I loved that they included, and again, there isn't a lot of there's a lot of back stuff story for Dungeons and Dragons. The inclusion of the Harpers. The Harpers is this great secret society that I love. And the fact that they got that worked in there too, I thought was great.
Yeah. It's like when you're running any other campaign and you include the Templars, right? Or you include, if you're running, I run a game that's often set in the Victorian era, and I'll use the precursor to the Secret Service. The Pinkerton Detectives.
Yeah.
These groups that they operate a little bit outside of societal norms, but they've got enough lore to make them interesting. I like the Harpers, and I like the fact that both our OP NPC guy, who I can never remember his name, Zank, yeah, was a Harper and a
Fae, Paladin,
a Fae, and a Red Wizard.
Yeah.
And Chris Pine's character was a Harper who was like a disgraced Harper. That's a great little, you may have foregone your oath, but your oath hasn't foregone you kind of idea that really did add a little emotional depth to it that I really liked. And
who's better to deliver that kind of thing than a Paladin?
Right.
Yeah. So.
Than a Paladin with that accent.
Yes. All right. I think you have something you have to get to.
Yeah,
I've got some key collectibles to cover real quick. So we'll take another quick break and we'll come back. We'll do those and that'll be the day. So safe whatever you're doing and we'll be back in a minute.
Join the party. Head over to our link tree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.
Comic Collectibles is a pretty straightforward show. You got Rex here, he sells the comics, and you got Rockin' Robbie, he knows about the comics. And finally, John, well, no one really knows what John does. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a great guy, but he just keeps showing up. Come to think of it, I don't even really know how he gets in here. Anyway, awesome comics, rare books, rarer signatures, slabbed books, and amazing cover sketches by Ken Hazer and others. Simple formula, you want the comics, you buy the comics. To sum up, Rex sells the comics, Robbie knows the comics, and John, who might possibly be a ghost. I mean, seriously, has anyone ever seen him show up or leave? Comic Collectibles with Rex and John, Mondays from 6 to 8 Eastern on The Experience. Comic Culture and Sales.
You know how when you go to Comic-Con, after Comic-Con, you go to the hotel bar, and there's a whole bunch of people playing music and dancing, and you've got Pikachu and Lara Croft Tomb Raider doing the cha-cha slide just down from Deadpool and Batman and Wonder Woman? That's every Saturday night over on the Experience Twitch channel. Join Taji Beats for the EXP Dance Party, exclusively on Twitch, twitch.tv/the_EXP.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Remember to stick around. We have a lot of great stuff on the lineup today. Right after this is What's in the Box, and then we've got Space Cadets. You want to stick around for all that. Let's go ahead and jump into our key collectibles. I thought we'd do some Dungeons and Dragons key collectibles, and it turns out there aren't that many. So I had to really dig for these. So let's blast through these pretty quick. We got the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons book #1 from DC Comics. This was the first ongoing comic book series based off of Dungeons & Dragons Forgotten Realms. High end on this is 25, median's 8, low end is 2. Then we got when Devil's Due picked it up, Forgotten Realms Homeland #1 from 2005. Now this was the first appearance of Drizzt Do'Urden, who's a big character in the lore. A uniquely decent dark elf among a decent dark elf among a race of sociopaths. This goes for $120. Median's $4, low end is 12. From there, we get they did a series called Forgotten Realms Starless Night #1. This was based on the R.A. Salvatore story. Only 5,352 copies were ordered by retailers. This goes for $70 in the high end. Median is 20, low end is 5. It's a 48-page book. After that, we have, this came out from a small publisher. I think it was like them doing their own stuff. This is Dungeons & Dragons Vecna, Hand of the Revenant. Vecna is another big character. This came out in 2002. This is the origin of Vecna the Lich, when he was human, his magical education in the past, and the siege of Fleeth in the present. This goes for $300. Median's 100, low end is 30. DC did this series, Dragonlance #1 in 1987. I remember picking this up, not knowing what Dragonlance and had a tie to Dungeons & Dragons. This was the premiere issue of the ongoing series inspired by the 1984 Dragonlance novels. This is high end is 15, median is 5, low end is $1. All right, after that we have, if you're fans of Critical Role, this was the free comic book day book that featured both the Mighty Nine and the Witcher. So you had both of them there. This came out in 2021. It was a 10-page preview. The Mighty Nine side was a 10-page preview of Jester Lavor's origin, the first in a series of original graphic novels showcasing members of the Mighty Nine. You can pick this up for $3 on the high end, $2 or $1 even. So, Rick and Morty had their fun with Dungeons and Dragons. This was Rick and Morty versus Dungeons and Dragons #1 from 2018, premiere issue of a 4-part limited series that begins with Morty learning how to play Dungeons and Dragons before being thrust into an alternate realm where the game is real. And you can pick these up for $4 on the high end, $2 on the median, low end is $1. And then the important thing here is who wrote these. Jim Zub, who's known for doing works like this, but Patrick Rothfuss, the guy that wrote The Name of the Wind, the Kvoth series, is the co-writer on this one. So if you're a fan of the Name of the Wind series, he worked on this. So there's also a 3D variant cover of it that high end on this is $65, median is $18, low end is $5. Then TSR tried to put out their own graphic novels. This was written by Roy Thomas with art by Thomas Yates. Dragonlance Saga #1 from 1987. They did the first 3 issues, then DC published the last 2. High end on this is $15, median is $5, low end is $1. And then this is interesting. This came out from, I believe, IDW. This was Dungeons & Dragons 100-page Spectacular #1 from 2020. And this reprinted like the Drizzt novel and some other previous stuff. So they kind of went, yeah, give us the old stuff and we'll put it all together. So if you want those stories without having to go back and pay that money, you can pick this up on high end for $12, medians for $3, low end is $1. So yeah, Patrick Rothfuss is a big fan of Dungeons and Dragons. He plays celebrity games, stuff like that, which is probably why he hasn't finished the damn 3rd book in the series. Yeah, I've read the first 2. And Kvoth is one of the most annoying characters. I love him. He's another bard. And I love the character, but he makes so many random ass choices. It is such a tough series to read because you just want to strangle the guy and go, stick with something. Get revenge for your family. Go after the girl. Get your education. Pick one of them. He's never gonna. I think I want him to. I don't think I want him to. Well, fair point. So, do you agree that Kvoth is very frustrating? So, go ahead.
The epitome of a Mary Sue, and the only reason he works is because it's being told from the perspective of his old fat loser self.
Yeah, but it's such a shiny object character. You know, I can go after the people that killed my parents. Oh, the girl I love, I have to go after her. Wait, no, my education. I have to go back and get my education. Pick a lane.
Yeah, there was a chapter, I think, in the first book that apparently Lin-Manuel Miranda credits with a song, sparking a song that's in Hamilton. The story of tonight, he wrote it based on the 3 of them coming back from the bar.
There's supposed to be, yeah, I know the song. Supposedly, there is a adaptation of it in progress with Lin-Manuel Miranda as part of it. But nothing's been on talking about it in a long time. All right, we got to wrap it up there, guys. Have a great weekend, and stick around for what's in the box.
Do you remember what it was like when you were a little kid and you got a letter in the mail? Now imagine that letter was filled with information about your favorite shows, pop culture questions, links to things you're going to want to see later, and even sneak peeks at upcoming programming here on The Experience. That's what the EXP mailing list is. Every week, we send you sneak peeks, information, and all of the relevant links for all of the shows you want to see. Sign up now on our website or scan the QR code that's on your screen right now.